Number one. Are you ready? Are you ready?
Tremendous show, tremendous success.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Uncensored America podcast. It's me, Francesco, and tonight I have a very special guest, Mark Szuszkiewicz, the 46th District Assemblyman candidate in South Brooklyn, here tonight. And Mark, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, I'm Mark Szuszkiewicz. I'm running for State Assembly in the 46th Assembly District in South Brooklyn. As he mentioned, that includes half of Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Dyker Heights, Brighton Beach, and all of Coney Island. And I have a background in financial services and multiple professions, some background in TV as well. And I'm used to conducting interviews for so many years, and now I'm the one I'm going to have to get used to being the one that's being interviewed now that I'm a politician. But I decided to run for office because I think there's a lot of nonsense going on, and I don't trust the politicians out there to do the right thing, and I trust myself to do the right thing. And that's exactly what I'm going to do when I am elected on November 3rd.
You know, it's funny you say that. I was going to say that about you. You know, from speaking to you and, researching you, it feels like you're not the typical politician. Like, you're not the person that's going in there as a politician. You're going in there as a New York resident and a New York citizen, and you know what your city needs and what your people need versus the politician who's always playing on the line, which is
They complain about the problems, but they don't have any ideas on how to fix them. And something that I'm noticing with a lot of the campaign advertising now is they're trying to take credit for things because they voted for a bill. Like, let's say it'll say on their advertising, help get this to passed and help get that passed, or help bring prescription drug costs down. And it's like, just because you voted for the bill, whether it's on the federal level or state level, that doesn't mean that you wrote the bill. That doesn't mean that you came up with the idea. It means you voted that way. That doesn't. They put it in an advertisement as if it implies that they did the legwork and the research to try to put the bill together. But in reality, all they did was vote for it, and they're trying to put it in campaign advertising saying help pass this, but that just meant that they voted for it. So.
it's almost like empty talk, the usual empty talk you get from individuals where it's hard to make a trusting. As a voter, it's hard for me to trust somebody that I feel is just talking. Sometimes you just want to see the action and less talking. So if you're going to talk, you got to back up with action too. And I feel like that's something that we're seeing start to transition into the political spectrum more and more. And I think that's the fresh new face of people moving into politics, like yourself. That's the impression I get.
You see more people that aren't career politicians, and people are more open to that idea. I mean, some of them, might have a good heart, but their ideas aren't exactly very smart. Like, especially on the Democratic side, like Ocasio-Cortez with her background. And I'm not trying to discredit, bartenders or anything like that. I mean, she has other knowledge and everything, but her. The Democrats have this money grows on trees mentality, and, this what sounds like simple solutions just doesn't work. And that's a major problem. So there's some people who have a good heart and go into it for the wrong reasons, but they have no idea what they're doing. So you need the combination of somebody that's knowledgeable, has, creative ideas, but also understands how things actually work, and not thinking from a fantasy fairy tale land, like, we're just going to do this and then everything's going to be, sunshine and rainbows, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I was an economics major in college. I went to St. John's University here in New York. So it's just always fascinated me how, like, you keep hearing, like, from the Democrat side, raise taxes, and, when they talk about all these ideas, and that's what they are, they're ideas, like, the Green New Deal and things of the sort. And it's like, ideas are great. But now who's going to have to pay for those ideas along the way, and how? And they never really have an understanding of how the economy works, I feel, or they're just out of touch.
Yeah, I mean, the trickle-down effect, I mean, it's advertised as, the people who are opposed to it, it makes it seem like, it's all just for the rich, and, the rich people will have more money, and then they're going to give you some. Sure they will. And they really just don't understand that when you lower taxes, especially on the corporate level, it doesn't mean just big corporations. It's also small businesses that are structured as a corporation. They have more money to put into opening up another location, which creates more jobs. It doesn't mean that the minimum wage person is going to get a big raise. It means that there's going to be more jobs out there for people instead of people being on unemployment. And that's how the trickle-down effect works. And even on the corporate level, when you lower corporate income taxes, that's more profits, and that's more the same thing with being able to open and expand even further when you have more profits. But aside from that, you also, the company's value for publicly traded companies, the stock price goes up, which means the stock market is better, and the person who has, the middle class person who has their 401k, is the stock value of their retirement account goes up. So it's not just about the minimum wage person, is going to make more money. It's about more jobs being out there and the overall economy being better. But of course, people don't think that way, and they just think, oh, the rich people are going to have more money and then they're going to be generous and give it to you. That's not what the trickle-down effect is at all.
At all. In fact, Reagan, I think, proved that best during his presidency. And it's, the value of trickle-down economics is consistent whenever used.
Which is why it's nicknamed Reaganomics. But,
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know what the Democrats one is, because it just, increases poverty and crime. Maybe they call it thugonomics.
Untouchable. Word life. This is basic thugonomics. This is basic thugonomics. Word life.
I've been saying that on this show. I'm like, I come from Italian immigrants, and we come from a socialist country. Italy is a socialist country, and I see it with my relatives who are my age. I'm 33, and I see it with them who can't find the job still. When the seniors are still working, they don't want to retire. The tax rate is so high in Italy that they're actually facing more backlash from the high taxes, that their day-to-day spending is nowhere near what it could be with a more privatized and more, again, Reaganomics concept throughout Italy. And the U.S. has that potential. So that's where I stand. I just feel like New York itself is the hub of the world, in my opinion. So if New York can be turned into this thriving hotbed that it was, I feel like under Giuliani. Like I feel we were at our pinnacle during that time.
People who are socialists don't understand the concept of, common sense, like motivation. Like if you have this idea, like the iPhone or any of the other revolutionary things, you're going to say, well, why am I going to do all this work to bring it to market and to do all these things if I'm going to make the same money as the next guy? Like, what's the motivation for me to do that if we all make the same amount of money? Like, I might as well just, that's why America thrived and became what it was, because we come up with revolutionary ideas, because profit is the motivation. People want those yachts and mansions and things of that nature, and that's why they work hard to get it. And you also see, they're okay with people like LeBron James or Jay-Z and Beyonce making money. But if there's a CEO of a company, which I understand, people think CEOs, okay, the company didn't lost money and the CEO still paid himself a bonus. But at the same time, that CEO is an extremely smart person who is intelligent enough to run a Fortune 500 company. And if he isn't paid what he wants to get paid, then there's another company that's going to hire him. So, and they're going to pay him what he wants, and then that company isn't going to make as much. And I know there's a lot of corruption, especially in the financial industry, and there's a lot of evil bankers and evil CEOs out there. But at the same time, just from that concept, people don't like CEOs making money, but they're okay with celebrities making money. There's still good CEOs out there that are intelligent people, and they want to get paid what they feel they deserve to get paid. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere else. And if a company is failing, you don't want to lose somebody that has the potential to bring them back in the right direction.
Right. And if moving into the elections coming up, right? I always feel that New York, and especially New York City, we're so used to hearing that standard expression of, well, New York's always blue, New York's always Democrat. And it's honestly tiring for someone even like me, who, I've been Republican, I've been conservative my whole life. I come from a traditional family, the nuclear family, as they call it. Yeah. And I just feel like there is a growing enthusiasm, I think, more towards the Republican Party than there ever was in years in New York. And I don't know if you feel that as well.
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, a lot of people, de Blasio is giving the Democrats a bad name, but I mean, I was surprised to see that they did a quote, one of those polls out there about Cuomo, like, and they said 72% of people feel that Cuomo is doing a good job, but you can't really trust the polls out there. But I mean, with him, with the whole nursing home thing, I think a lot of it is during the crisis with COVID, they took every single opportunity for airtime as possible. And so many people were in so much fear that they're glued to their television on the news, wondering what's happening. When are we going to reopen? What's the latest death toll? And you know, they're out there getting their camera time and saying their corny jokes occasionally. And some people watching them during this time of fear are looking to them to be leaders, and some people fell for the BS. So I mean, it's still possible that it's. I mean, I still think New York is blue right now. Surprising, you know. I don't understand why a lot of people don't open up, open their eyes and realize what's going on. But there are a lot more that, you know, are seeing the devastation caused by Democrats. And one of the things that I said at the rally today is, you know, it's common sense, because we saw in the 70s they defunded the police when crime was on the rise, and that only increased crime more. And you know, they should just admit their mistakes and realize, okay, you know, we were wrong. Defunding the police is not a good idea. Crime is continuing. We need more police on the streets in order to tackle this issue. But they don't care about our safety. They don't, you know, they have their private security. They have the police protecting them, and they don't care about any of that.
It is clear that common sense is lacking with our legislators now. We've seen it happen before in the 70s when they decided that defunding the police was a good idea and crime continued to increase. We're seeing it happen now. Crime is on the rise. They're defunding the police. Crime is increasing more, and it should be common sense that that's not the solution. They should see that it's not bringing any results. It's making crime worse. But instead of admitting their mistakes, they're doubling down on the defunding of police, and it makes absolutely no sense. And they tried to say years ago when de Blasio was elected to his first term that Joe Lhota was out there fear-mongering, talking about crime coming back if de Blasio wins. Well, guess what? It wasn't fear-mongering, because it's happening right now. And the people need to realize that the Democrats apparently don't care about our safety, because they see that crime is increasing and they're doing absolutely nothing about it. And it's time for a change, and it's time to get rid of the Democrats that don't care about our safety. Thank you, everyone.
And a lot of people are realizing that, you know, the city is less safe, and they're concerned about their safety, and the Democrats are doing a horrible job. Some people could see past it, but you have Hollywood out there. It's so tough to tackle when you have, you know, even in the sports world, LeBron James and so many people who are idols, who are talking bad about Trump and talking bad about Republicans and putting the false narrative of racism, despite no actual history of racism within the Republican Party. It was the other way around. They just control the media to be able to brainwash people to say, oh, it was that guy, you know. So and some people are opening up because the information is out there on social media, and some people have the common sense to realize that it's wrong what these celebrities are saying, and some people don't.
And the thing that you just nailed, I think, is the social media aspect, because what bothers me now is I'm noticing that, and I just spoke to someone today, in fact, that the other Trump rally actually up in Irvington, New York, and the guy told me that they deleted his Facebook account because he was regularly posting conservative articles, and he got his entire account shut down on Facebook, and it's happening across Instagram too now. Yeah. And it's like the First Amendment is provided for us to have freedom of speech. Now, I don't have to listen to what you say. Yeah. I could choose to ignore it, but you have the right to say it.
Yeah, and there's an unfollow button, and you know, if you're a conservative, you notice that people do unfollow you, especially your friends and family. Even in some cases, they'll unfollow, unfriend, and you could do that if you don't want to listen to what somebody has to say. But it shouldn't be, unless there's something completely inappropriate. But conservative politics isn't anywhere near on the lines of inappropriate. And Facebook and social media said originally that they weren't publishers, and now they're trying to say that they are publishers to try to get away with being able to decide what they allow and what they don't allow. And they generally wait until somebody has a following before they go and get rid of them, which is a psychological toll on the person, because they go and build 5 or 6 figure followings, and then next thing you know, they're censored. One of the accounts that follows me, New York for Trump, I posted it on my Instagram at Mark for NY. That I used to search for him because I'll see something on his stories, and then I want to repost that, or I want to share that later on. So I'll go back to his page and I search. Normally, since we follow each other and he has 90,000 followers, I just type in new NY and it comes up. And now it's like new NY _T, and then it still doesn't come up unless I put the full name. And that's not how it's supposed to work. So they're doing all different types of censorship with social media, including with myself, because I used to DM people, like even when we were talking about doing this interview, I would say, hey, look at markforny.com to do more research about me if you have any questions, for this interview. And the DM didn't go through. The first 2 months of my campaign.
Oh yeah, you were telling me, yeah.
Yeah, the first 2 months of my campaign, I was able to DM people, hey, I'm running for office, yada, 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 and here's my website. And it would go through and it would show the preview like it does whenever you put in a website in a DM. Now it's blocked from sending on DMs. And if I put the text in a post on Instagram, it doesn't sometimes post to Facebook because it has that website. So I have my Instagram set up where it automatically goes to my Mark for NY Facebook post every time I post on Instagram, and sometimes it won't even just go through. Like, you see how creative, you said you went on my website, there's a lot of creative nonpartisan ideas on there, and apparently the powers that be don't want any part of that because they want to destroy this country and they want to bring forward communism. So, and people say it's fear mongering, but let's look back at when de Blasio was running for his first and his second term. His first Republican opponent was Joe Lhota. I interviewed him on my TV show back then, Not Politics as Usual.
Now, the mayor that we have right now, I see him as pretty much a super rich, borderline narcissist, kind of imperial ruler.
Man, Bloomberg is up.
What will be the I'm hoping stark difference between the way a Bloomberg administration was and a Lhota administration would be?
Well, Andy, nice to know you have a significant opinion on the current mayor.
I'm a little shy.
A little shy on that, I can tell.
And one of the smartest people I've ever met. He was the deputy mayor for Giuliani, and he was talking about, if you elect de Blasio, you're going to see the crime rise just like it used to, because it was the Republicans under Giuliani that ended up bringing New York out of the gutter and, become one of the safest, largest cities in the world. And now it's, and then in re-election, the same thing. Nicole Malliotakis, who's running for Congress now in Staten Island and parts of South Brooklyn, she was saying the same thing. Crime is on the rise, and they just kept saying, oh, it's fear mongering, it's fear mongering. Now we're saying, the crime is not only is crime on the rise, it's a reality, it's not fear mongering, but now it's, they seem to have a socialist communist agenda here.
This guy, de Blasio, he's not from New York. He's from Massachusetts. You got a Red Sox fan running Yankee Town, and he could care less about everyday New Yorkers. He's so full of it that he goes and takes pictures with the police officers and then stabs them in the back when he's talking about them. He uses them for private security, but he's out there talking about defunding the police and all that nonsense. He goes and does ridiculous things like saying that we have the least amount of people in jail since World War II, and think that the city is somehow safe when we're all seeing the riots and the violence and the murders in the city. Just because you're releasing criminals does not make the city safer, and if anything, it makes it less safe. And this guy has the nerve to say something stupid like that. It's absolutely ridiculous. He's been talking about it for a long time, that he wants to find a way to end congestion traffic so that he doesn't have to sit in traffic when he's going to the gym in Park Slope. Well, guess what? I guess he figured out a way. He shut down the entire city, ruined millions of people's lives, and he could care less about it as long as his life is comfortable. He wants to defund the police. He wants to destroy the city. And what I say is we defund the Blasio and get him the hell out of New York. And the worst part about it is he's not up for re-election in 2021. So Comrade de Blasio here, his mission is to destroy the city, and he could care less about the millions of lives that he's been ruining, and he's going to continue to destroy the city until 2021. So hopefully people learn their lesson and don't elect another dumb, evil Democrat into office in 2021. I'm Mark Szuszkiewicz, and I approve this message. As I just said it, Brooklyn.
Tremendous show, tremendous success.
By forcing businesses to shut down, and you have over 20% of businesses across the country who will never reopen again. And it's not just small businesses, because in my neighborhood, Century 21, which used to buy up property of the small businesses surrounding it to expand, and now they're under, because when I interviewed Ian Smith, who was the gym owner that
in Jersey, Belmore, right?
Yeah, Belmore, you know, the Tillis gym over there, he was on Fox News, and, you know, he was talking about, you know, his struggles, but it's not just small businesses. Even big businesses like Century 21 can't survive with 6 months of no cash flow.
You stayed open regardless. They put the locks on your door. They kept putting locks on your door. Then you took the hinges off, which is creative, and stayed open 24/7. And then they boarded it up, and then you kicked it down. Can you just tell us through the whole process of everything that went on?
You know, at the end of the day, Frank and I are just trying to stay in business.
Yeah.
You know, we're just trying to stand up for what we know is right, and that's the right of anybody to make a living for their family. The first and most common criticism we got was, oh, you guys want your gym open so you can just work your muscles and look good. And it's like, if that's what you think the gym is about, you clearly have never been to the gym.
Yeah. I lift things up and put them down.
I'm Hans. And I'm Franz. And we want to pump you up.
Because while that might be that for some people, you don't know what that does for their mental health. For a government to have this type of power to walk in and say, you're closed because I said so.
Is it for what? Arresting me for what? I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America? I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
That's a dangerous power to have.
Tremendous show, tremendous success.
It's, you know, Modell Sporting Goods is out of business. You know, my sports show, he was nice, generous enough to donate $5,000 to one of these little league organizations. So I'm probably going to reach out to him to see what his take is on it if he wants to discuss it. But I mean, there's a lot of people that are just, it's going to be so hard to come back from this. And the answer to everything is just to increase taxes and, you know, get more federal funding. And, you know, once again, the money grows on trees, Democrat mentality, where they don't realize that we're going to significantly devalue our currency.
Correct.
What happened to other countries. And even, you know, the gyms that are suing and the restaurants, when they sue the city, the money's got to come from somewhere. So even these businesses that win all these lawsuits, which, you know, they probably will, it's, you know, the money's got to come from somewhere. And it's a very scary thing because it's going to devalue our currency. I don't see, you know, especially with the Democratic majority in Congress and in New York, if New York controlling both the Assembly, Senate, and the governor, it's going to be hard to see, you know, to come back with them just asking for more money.
And that's just how they are. That's really just how the Democratic Party is. Anytime they have to have an answer for something, it's tax hikes. Like, they just believe that raising taxes and printing more money is going to be the answer to all the problems. But like you said, when you devalue our currency, you diminish our buying power, you diminish any power we have in travel, and the list goes on in terms of, you know, you're building your GDP and whatnot. And that's something they're not grasping. You're actually going to be manipulating our dollar down to next to nothing.
Yeah, it's going to be just about a little bit more valuable than the monopoly dollar.
Yeah, and that's kind of what China did, didn't it? It manipulated its dollar all the way down, and that's why everybody wants to buy and build through China and buy back from there, because it costs almost nothing. So again, these are the Democrat ties to communism and socialism. And I know a lot of people like to dance the word socialism around, but I think that's just putting it as a pillow expression, because the reality is what they're pandering to all of us is actually communism.
Yeah, I mean, Benny Johnson from Turning Point USA did a great mini doc or whatever you want to call it about, the most dangerous virus in the world being communism. And, democratic socialism is just like the the dressing it up to make it sound fancy. But the ultimate goal of socialism is communism. You see it happen all the time, especially when you have, even with Nazi Germany, they go on, they do, they take on the churches, they take away guns, and you see it happen with Venezuela with the statues coming down and censorship, and you see people speaking out that used to live in communism.
1932, Stalinist-backed communists in Germany formed a group to violently clash with police, terrorize the public, and physically assault their political enemies in the street. The name of that group, Antifasciste Aktion Antifa. This was their symbol. Their tactics have now moved to our streets, and so have their motivations. Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx both agreed. The goal of socialism is communism. Power and control. It is always about power and control. What is happening right now in America is not new. In fact, it's centuries old. The tactics are meant to bewilder you and make you question your institutions. They're meant to divide us and raise what we know as America to the ground. It's a revolution by the deadliest virus known to man. Communism. You can't kill an idea, but ideas can kill you. We must fight this virus to survive.
Why do I even worry about some silly little statues coming down or some silly little street names changing? Why do I care? It's because the last time I didn't care about this, I was a teenager. I have already lived through this thing when I was living in Venezuela. Statues came down. Chavez didn't want that history displayed. And then he changed the street names. Then came the curriculum. Then some movies couldn't be shown on certain TV channels. And so on and so forth. You guys think it can't happen to you? I've heard this so many times. But always be on guard. Never believe something can't happen to you. You need to guard your country and your society, or it will be destroyed. We didn't believe it could happen to us. Us Venezuelans, Cubans warned us. And we're like, Venezuela, we know what freedom is like. That's not going to happen here. Yet it happened. And there's clearly a lot of people wanting to destroy the U.S.
Saying that this is what they do. They take on the churches, and people couldn't go to churches, but they could go to protests, and they could do all different types of things. But not, you could burn churches, you could tear down statues. All these things were just were happening, and it's part of the process. It's not something that happens overnight. And all these countries. There's a video out there. I did on my finaltakes.com YouTube page. I did a Mark versus Marxism episode, which is just basically a series of videos that other people did, including the one by Benny Johnson that I referenced, and the lady from Venezuela that was saying that this is what happened in Cuba, and the people in Cuba were warning us, and we're saying, oh, it's not going to happen here. And that's what's called psychologically normalcy bias, because you've been an American and you've been somewhat spoiled your whole life, and you think, oh, it's not going to happen here. But until it happens, and then it's too late. And unfortunately, it sounds like fear mongering and everything, but if America falls, then that's when you can have global communism, and that's where there's no revolting, there's no coming back from that. If America
there's
falls,
not.
That's it.
We are the beacon of freedom. I mean, it's a known fact, and that's why people resent. I don't say hate us. I think we're resented because we've lasted as long as we did under the pinnacle of freedom and the idea of freedom. And like you said, Marxism, communism, the whole only way Marxism will ever work, and Karl Marx said it himself, is if everyone becomes a communist nation, is the only way that utopia of communism would ever work. But they don't tell you.
People are wholeheartedly believing that, and they don't care who they hurt in the process, thinking that it's for the greater good. Even if it doesn't happen in their lifetime, they're going to do what it takes because they think it's a noble act. And that's why you had the people in the KGB and doing the things they did, because they thought back then that they were doing what's for the greater good of the world, where everyone is equal, and this is going to work. But going back to the motivation factor that I mentioned earlier, like, it sounds good, everyone's making the same money, but not. It's like, you know, capitalism is unequal wealth, and socialism is equal misery, basically. So.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing, too. And you highlighted something earlier that I loved when you talked about social media, talked about information. And again, you know, I'm somebody who's on the front line of information. Every day I wake up, I go into work, and I'm dealing with the front line of information. And it's education. Education I don't even want to limit it to just New York City. I think it expands across the nation at this point and globally. It seems like these liberal arts programs are genuinely diminishing the value of multiple perspectives and two opinions. And if you express, I can confidently tell you, if you express any sense of patriotism in instruction, for whatever reason, it just seems as though you're doing a disservice, and you should be teaching guilt almost. So, as a history teacher, it's hard to walk that fine line and try to keep your job by being be the best and most reasonable person you can be with information going into minds that are absorbing this. And a part of me feels like what we're seeing today is a product of education misinformation.
Yeah.
And it's different.
I mean, that's the polite way of saying it, but it's indoctrination is the more you know.
You said it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad and it's scary at the same time. And even in my day, like, you know, a lot of people don't even realize that the Republican Party was the one that ended slavery, and it's not in the textbooks. When you talk about Lincoln and the Civil War, you talk about the North versus the South. They don't talk about the Republican Party unless it's in a negative aspect. They don't talk about, you know, when women got the right to vote, that it was the Republican Party on the forefront of that. I think it was like 19% of Democrats that voted for it. The rest was Republican. And a higher percentage, even though the Democrats at the time were okay with the civil rights, there was a significantly higher percentage of Republicans that passed that, you know, gave the blacks the right to vote, gave women the right to vote. The Civil Rights Act passed mainly with a majority of Republicans. Martin Luther King Jr. was a Republican. You can't really get a confirmation of that on the internet, but his entire family is, well, at least the majority of the family that I know of is Republican. And, you know, it's just a lot of information out there that just isn't there. You have PragerU did a very good episode of the myth that the party switched, and it's like that should be common sense as well. Like, oh, we've been the good guys this whole time. Let's just try something different, and let's just be racist now. You know, we weren't racist for the entire history, but you know what? We're gonna be racist now. Like, are you serious? Like, and you believe that? You know, right. People believe that, and you know, the South was majority Democrat until, you know, you saw even Clinton won a large portion of the South. And, you know, it goes into it with PragerU that only 2 people during the Nixon era actually switched over. And during the Nixon era, Nixon really put in an effort to end segregation, even though it was passed as a law prior to that. But he actually, you know, put in the logistics behind the busing and actually making it happen in the country to end segregation. And it drastically expanded food stamps too, because people think Republicans don't care about the poor. We just don't want people to take advantage of the services there. Right. And you do have a lot of people taking advantage of it. But and I'm going to get into that. I guess I could segue into it now. That's one of my ideas on my website.
Absolutely.
Is, you know, to tackle the mental health and the homeless problem. A lot of that is substance abuse related, and people need to get tested when they're on social services, welfare, and, you know, food stamps and things of that nature. Not because we want to take it away if they test positive, but you want to get them the help that they need. You want to put them into rehabilitation and help them become more productive members of society. And I go into the detail, the step-by-step process, but none of it is really, as long as you're going to rehab, or as long as you're trying, you're going to continue receiving benefits. But we want people to be more productive. And, that's why the homeless, I think a large part of homelessness is because of that. Like, you're enabling their addiction, and then they're using, instead of paying for rent or other bills, even though their rent is reduced, they're buying drugs, and they're spending their money on drugs. They're selling their food stamps to buy drugs, and then next thing you know, they're homeless, and it's or severely mentally ill, or both. So it's we have to do something to help the people in need, and not just enable them. De Blasio with his carefree, come here and get high, and with no worries facilities. Like, that's what is that going to do?
It's enabling them. That's what it's doing. Because now by doing that,
they're going to get better if you're making it easier for them to get high, and not giving them a motivation to better their lives. So, but back to the point, it's it's a myth, and people believe that parties switched, and you tell them about the Republican Party ending slavery, and it's like, oh, it's a different party. Okay, how? Like, what switched between? Like, what do they do that's racist? Like, if you say voter ID is racist, it's like, what's racist about it? Like, how is that not common sense to you? If you go to buy alcohol, it's racist to think that minorities don't have IDs. And there's been videos about that, with people going into the projects and things of that nature and saying, do you have an ID? And they're like, yeah. Like, would it be racist if somebody asked you for an ID to vote? No. Like,
no.
Black people don't have an ID. Even the people who don't have money have the food stamp ID, which has their photo on it. Like, it doesn't have to be. You could make it where it's not a driver's license, and you can make it where if you don't have an ID, you could go and basically have a board of elections ID printed out for you or something.
Right. Which is that's something I have been advocating for my whole life. I've always said there should be a voter ID.
And I've worked as a poll site coordinator before, so I understand the process, and it's hard to commit fraud. It's pretty much impossible with the if you have an ID. And another aspect of it is you have people who don't speak English, and you only have translators for like the majority demographic in the area. So you'll have a Hispanic translator, and sometimes you'll have a Chinese translator, but you don't have a Russian translator. You don't have an Italian translator. You don't have a lot of other, and sometimes you might have a Spanish one there, but you won't have the Chinese one there, and the Chinese person will come in, and they just don't know anything. If you have a sign there in every single language, please present your identification to the person there. They can hand the clerk the ID, and they say, okay, go over there to vote. Then they walk over to the place to vote. Then they go to that table, they hand their ID, and they can find where they are and then hand them the ballot. And, but instead people just walk away because they can't get help, because they just can't communicate with anybody. It's sad, because they want to vote, and they're being denied the right to vote because of one of those obstacles.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be something that New York City itself is now facing. And I thought about something actually a couple nights ago, and it stuck with me. Everybody fleeing New York City, right? There's the numbers we hear it every day. People are fleeing the city. And I'm trying to get an understanding, like, who is fleeing New York City? Is it mostly the Republicans? Is it the Democrats? Like, who's running? Is it just in general mixed? Like,
I wonder that too. And sadly, I think a lot of it would be Republicans.
So do I. Yep.
Because it's like, I want to move to a red state because I'm sick of this liberal nonsense.
Yeah.
And I know the majority of my friends are Democrat, because I was in Brooklyn my whole life, and I have a lot of Republican friends too. But I know one of them who I went to high school with. She's moving out of Staten Island to another state, and it's sad, because I think that's the case, that we're losing some of the Republicans. At the same time, we're changing other people's minds too to vote red, because they're realizing the disaster Democrats cause in
right. And a part of me was always thinking, like, is this part of Bill de Blasio's plan to begin with, to make it so unbearable here that the people who want law and order, the people who want, the comfortable, the civil, hardworking, you feel safe letting your kids go to school and walk back home. Does he want those people driven out so that he can remold it like we talked about earlier? It's going to be a lot easier for him to get these communist programs pushed through if he doesn't have that red tape stand. And by red tape, I mean Republican citizens standing in his way.
I mean, for the most part, we don't have the elected officials now. So
right.
There's very little red tape. People say, well, why aren't the Republicans speaking out? It's like, because you didn't vote any of them. We have 0 congressmen in New York, in all 5 boroughs of New York City. In my district in Bay Ridge, it shared the district with Staten Island. 2 years ago, they elected Max Rose. That was the only Republican congressman there. I interviewed 2 congressmen ago, because it was Dan Donovan before that, and Michael Grimm, who got destroyed by the media. I interviewed him while he was still the elected congressman, and he was talking about how, as the only Republican in all 5 boroughs, not only is he responsible for his constituency, but he has Republicans in Manhattan who are asking him for help because there's no one there to help him in Manhattan or any of the other boroughs, and he took on everything. He was probably one of the hardest working politicians out there. He was getting a lot of things done, and I guess they didn't like it because what they did, he had this restaurant called Health Delicious, where his business partner was responsible for the day-to-day, but he was paying people off the books. Okay, that got reported to the news as 19 counts of tax fraud, and he did jail time. I went to the sentencing hearing, and his lawyer said, well, he wasn't responsible for the day-to-day. He was a silent partner. His business partner did all of that. He served in the military, the FBI. He served the country, and so on and so forth. And he takes care of his sick mother 3 days a week, and also nobody does jail time for this crime. And you see how common that is. I mean, pizzerias, restaurant owners, they pay their delivery.
Mostly cash.
It's a normal thing. So yes, it's illegal, and fine him or whatever. But jail time, I think he was sentenced to 3 years. He didn't serve anywhere near that. But at the same time, that's what the media did. They destroyed him as soon as he got out, and he ran again for re-election. But Trump endorsed the incumbent Dan Donovan, and he wasn't able to get his seat back. But he took on, during Hurricane Sandy, the insurance companies wanted to get rid of flood coverage for Staten Island residents because Hurricane Sandy hit them so hard. He wrote, not just fought for it, but wrote the flood insurance reform bill. Maybe I'm misquoting the exact name of the bill, but preventing insurance companies from doing that. Yes, they were able to increase premiums, and that makes sense. I have a background in insurance too, so I mean, obviously you can increase premiums, but just to deny them coverage because of it was something that he fought against, and he ended up passing that. And that's just some of the good things that he was doing. And apparently they don't like when Republicans look good. They only want to make them look bad, so they find ways to make them look bad. And as a Republican in New York, I'm going to get, if I win, I'm going to get destroyed by the
Yeah, exactly.
Before the election, they're probably not going to say anything about me because they don't want to give me any attention. Because if they give me attention, even negative publicity, people will go, who is this guy? And they might look at my website and they'll say, oh, well, this is actually, he seems like a really nice guy. He does a lot of charity work. He has a lot of good ideas. He seems like he actually cares and wants to fix things. I think, the media is probably full of it, and I'm going to vote for this guy. But they don't want it. They're not going to give me the publicity unless maybe something to throw at me a few days before the election. But
which is something they would do because that's what the media seems to be doing nowadays anyway.
And then, people aren't going to really research or anything like that, and they're going to say, oh, this guy, whatever, misquote something like they do with Trump and, and all that. I mean, you can see on my Instagram, I have almost no filter when I post things. Definitely not like a typical politician. I've been in entertainment for the majority of time, so I like to make people laugh, but at the same time, when it comes to intelligence and creative ideas and fighting for people, I just don't care. I'll do whatever it takes, and and when it's time to get serious, I'm as serious as cancer, as I said before, which what some people say sometimes. So.
And that's what it goes back to again. It's like, the information, I feel like that has become such a crucial component to every election I could remember in my time now. And again, it's, they hear the expression, follow the money, follow the money. And I always think back to myself, well, who funds these media outlets and who's telling them where to lean their narratives? And it's always yellow journalism against the Republican Party.
Yeah. That's something that I said before. It's like the Democrats who say they hate all these evil corporations and everything. It's like those same evil corporations that you're talking about are the ones controlling the media, telling you what to think.
Right.
Like, how do you not realize that? Like, open your eyes. And nobody likes to be called a pawn or, sheep or manipulated, because they all like to think that they're smart and they're not gullible and, all of that. But it comes to a certain time when, like the boy who cried wolf or something, when they're putting out false information and they're caught putting out false information over and over again. Why do you still watch them? Why do you still believe what they're saying? Why don't you say to yourself, okay, Trump, every time I saw Trump said this, okay, then I got to go, well, what did he really say?
Exactly.
What was the full actual, conversation? What is the full speech, And that was growing up too. There's the old saying that the old timers had, don't trust everything you read in the papers. Now, it's not newspapers anymore that people are reading, but it's the same concept. Don't trust everything that you hear in the news, because they have their own agenda that they're trying to push in this case. And, you have to, they like to say, oh, well, you're brainwashed by CNN, you're brainwashed by Fox News. I never watched Fox News growing up or anything. Reagan was a Republican before Fox News existed. And
true.
There were plenty of Republicans out there well before Fox News. No, they weren't racist. Racist isn't a political ideology, and if it was the Democratic Party that was behind it. And all this nonsense that you think. What I used to do is I used to read something, and then I would or see something on the news, and I'd just be like, that kind of doesn't make sense to me. That sounds a little fishy to me. I don't know if I buy that. Like, I don't know if let me hear what the other side of the story is. But people don't want to hear this other side of the story.
And that's something I always preach. Like, I always preach, there's your side, the other side, and then there's the truth. Like, there's three sides in a story. So you have as an individual need to take the time out of your day, put aside the quick information access that we have nowadays, and just dig a little. What is it going to take you, 10, 15 minutes to dig to the bottom of a truth? Yeah. There's information everywhere.
And there's also, people read the headlines and that's it. They'll see the headlines when they're scrolling through social media, and that's what they remember. Number one, it's clickbait, so people could get the money for the advertising and everything. But those that don't click the article and read the actual article, which is a lot of people, and they see the headline, then they don't know what they're, they think that that's what happened, and that's what they're basing their conversation on later. And then it's I heard that Trump has an invested interest in hydroxychloroquine, which is why he was pushing it. But if you actually do your research, he has, the company has, one of his mutual funds in his trust has shares in hydroxychloroquine. Okay. First, and I think it's valued at something like maybe $5,000, $30,000 or something. You're talking about a multi-billion.
Chump change, right?
If you're, aside from that, when you invest in a mutual fund, whatever company it is you're basing on the performance of that fund, not because that fund holds a small percentage of Exxon or whatever company's in there. The fund manager has, hundreds of different stocks within there. They're changing the stocks regularly. You don't know what's in your mutual fund. You don't know every single stock that's in your mutual fund. If you were investing in individual stocks, you would buy the stock or you buy options in the stock,
right,
or something like that. Not just, buy a mutual fund because it has shares of the company that sells hydroxychloroquine.
I have a mutual fund. I could not tell you what's in it right now.
Yeah, no, most people can.
I couldn't tell you what's in it.
Even as a financial advisor, like, I would recommend mutual funds. I wouldn't know every single stock that's in the fund, and it's constantly changing.
Right.
So, like, you do have investors that won't invest in companies and mutual funds that have particular stocks for certain for eco reasons or whatever. Like, they don't want like companies like Exxon or something like that because of their own, beliefs or whatever. So sometimes you'd have to make sure that the mutual fund doesn't, that doesn't have any of those. But I'm going off on a tangent here, but you understand the point.
I fully understand. Yeah.
There's no way Trump said, oh, well, in the trust, there's a mutual fund that has hydroxychloroquine. If I go and push this out there, then I'm going to be rich. Like, wait a minute. I'm already rich, and I lost money by becoming president because half the people hate me, and my half the people hate my brand. So, and I'm working for free, donating my salary to charity every single year, which some people don't know because that's not something that's reported on, or any of the good things that he does.
Right, and it's always funny too. Like, I know near the end of the show, but how he was rich before becoming president, but I never see anybody question the president to become rich after presidency. And that's something that always started to rev me the wrong way, because it's like, well, you're crucifying a guy who's already rich and made his way. Forgive him for knowing his way around taxes. I would rather learn myself how he does it versus condemn him for it. But, there's people that consistently blame the rich, for example, for being rich. And it's like, no, shouldn't you aspire to learn how did they get there? What can I do to get there? What am I not doing right now that's not putting me on that path?
One of the seven deadly sins, envy, and it used to be where you see somebody who has the Mercedes in the mansion and is like, I want to be like that guy. What did he do or she do or whatever? And to get there, and you might maybe want to do the same profession as that person. But now it's like, oh, the hate towards that person for having something that you don't have, and oh, they're probably, doing things illegally or whatever, all types of hate towards people that have made it.
So now that we're nearing the end of the show, there's something I did want to ask you, and it's like, what do you feel is the biggest obstacle for you right now running for election?
Well, I'm not somebody that's as well known because this is my first rodeo in the political running for somewhat of a major office in the state assembly, and I don't have the funding that some of these people have, and I'm looking to take on the banks and their overdraft fees, the developers with their tax abatement. So I'm not exactly somebody that the majority of these companies want. So they're not rushing in to donate money to my campaign. They don't want me to be elected, and you need money for marketing. And you need volunteers to go out there and knock on doors. So, I'm one person. There's over 100,000 people in the district. So it's you need people to get out there and get the word. So social media is one aspect. I have some marketing material, door hangers to knock on doors and leave it there on their door if they're not there. And but there's only so much ground that I can cover by myself. So I have some help, but I think that's one of the big obstacles. The other obstacle is I'm in a district that it was 43% Republicans 2 years ago, but it wasn't a presidential election 2 years ago, and there are a lot of people that don't like Trump in my district. I think Coney Island was 90% Democrat, and they're probably going to just vote Democrat across the board because it's a presidential election. I originally didn't plan on running until 2022, but after COVID-19, I figured I gotta at least try now to go and do something. And I think I have a good chance of winning. A lot of people are waking up to the nonsense of the Democratic Party, and I'm not afraid to put the work in, despite the budget issue with me, not getting a lot of donations because I don't have big corporate sponsors or anything like that. I do a lot of the work myself. I do my own graphic design. I do my own social media. I do my own I design my own website. I shoot my own videos. I edit my own videos. So those are things that other candidates would have to spend thousands of dollars on doing. But since I have the knowledge of so many different things, I'm able to do a lot of the work myself. And I'm not afraid to go out there and knock on doors and hang up posters and businesses and speak to people.
And that's a message that would resonate with me as a voter. That's a message. What you just said is something that would resonate with me as a voter. It's somebody who is doing everything on their own back and their own backing. And that's how much you actually do care about your district. And I think that's the message that I perceived from what you just told me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing, Bay Ridge was a lot safer before Democrats, and now you're seeing people overdosing on drugs and people getting killed. And that was one of the reasons for the rally that we had today. This is being filmed on September 13th in Bay Ridge. Multiple people died in Bay Ridge. We had one that created headlines on the New York Post, and then another one happened after that. It's like, come on, it's so many people dying, and both from being shot and from overdoses, and it needs to stop. We need people that are going to back the police department, let them do their job, what they need to do to keep our streets safe, and they just don't seem to care whether people are dying, because as long as it doesn't affect their pocket or their quality of life, they just don't care.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I do think that it's good that there's someone like you who's trying to change that, because it is a major issue. And to be honest with you, it's a major issue across the entire city. I have it here in the Bronx. It's all over the place too. And I'm glad to hear that there's you. I know in my district, it's John Cummings, I know is running in our district, and hopefully he pulls it off as well. I'm definitely cheering for you. And I know to our listeners, and I'll be marketing for you myself. markfornewyork.com. That's Mark, number 4, newyork.com for further information.
NY, not
Oh, NY, right.
If those who are seeing it on the screen for the video can see it, but it's Mark, the number 4, ny.com. If you type it the other way, FOR, it's going to forward to the other one, because I set it up that way.
Smart.
Actually, I didn't want somebody to buy the other domain and put it as like a slander fake website or anything like that. So I made sure I took care of that too.
That's a good catch. All right, Mark, thank you for coming on Uncensored America podcast. And to my listeners, subscribe, review. Thank you for tuning in again. And Mark, thank you for taking the time out of your campaign and your day on a Sunday to join our show. Very happy to have you.
No problem. I'm glad to speak to you. So.
Thank you so much, man. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.
Tremendous show, tremendous success.